What if the greatest unsolved murder mystery in history wasn't just a tale of a monstrous killer, but a terrifying glimpse into the dark heart of a decaying empire, a story where the shadows held the secret to a killer who walked among kings and popes alike? Forget the textbook accounts, because today we are peeling back the layers of fog, gaslight, and gruesome detail to uncover the truly chilling, exciting, and absolutely mind-boggling story of Jack the Ripper, a phantom whose bloody reign in 1888. East London didn't just end lives, it shattered Victorian England's illusion of civility and forever changed the way the world views crime. This isn't just about 5 women. It's about the deep festering secrets of an era, the monumental failure of the world's first modern police force, and a terrifying legacy of pure anonymous evil that remains to this very day locked in the cold, damp cobblestones of Whitechapel. Our journey begins not with the Ripper's first confirmed victim, but with the atmosphere of the place and time. Whitechapel, London, 1888. Imagine a place where light barely penetrated the narrow, winding alleys, where the stench of poverty, sewage, and cheap gin hung heavy in the air. This was the dark underbelly of Queen Victoria's glittering empire, a labyrinthine slum overflowing with immigrants, destitution, and, most crucially for our story, desperately poor women driven to prostitution just to survive another night. This was a city waiting for a spark, a catalyst that would ignite its hidden horrors, and that spark was a monster in human form. The terror began in earnest on the night of August 31st, 1888. The victim was Mary Ann Polly Nichols, a 42-year-old woman whose life had been reduced to the streets. She was found in Bucks Row now, Durward Street. The brutality of her murder was immediately alarming. Her throat was severely cut, nearly severing her head, and she had suffered horrific abdominal mutilation. This wasn't a common street crime. This was the work of a fiend with a shocking degree of violence and, crucially, an eerie, almost surgical precision. The police, the Metropolitan and City of London forces, were immediately bewildered. They knew they had a monster, but they couldn't possibly grasp the scale of the nightmare that had just begun. A mere week later, on September 8th, the killer struck again, and with even greater ferocity. Annie Chapman, a 47-year-old, known as Dark Annie, was found in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street. Her throat was similarly slashed, and her internal organs had been removed and placed beside her body. A horrifying, almost ritualistic display that instantly screamed same killer. The horror was escalating. The community, already living on the edge of starvation and fear, was now gripped by a paralyzing terror. Who was this phantom who could strike with such speed and disappear without a trace? The world's focus now locked on to Whitechapel. The press, with its newly sensational style, dubbed the new journalism, fanned the flames of panic, creating a nationwide frenzy. The name Leather Apron was initially tossed around, a local boogeyman, but the true, iconic moniker was yet to arrive. The victims were all similar. Women in their 40s, forced into the streets, easily isolated, and, tragically, considered disposable by many in the upper crust of society. But to the killer, they were merely objects for his dark desires and gruesome experiments. Then came the double event on September 30th, the night that cemented the killer's legendary status and utter mastery of his terrifying craft. The first victim was Elizabeth Stride, 44, found in Dutfield's yard. Her throat was cut, but unlike the others, the body was not mutilated. Why? Investigators believe the killer was interrupted, perhaps by the cart of Louis Dimschitz, who discovered the body. The Ripper had been stopped mid-act, a mere moment away from completing his horrific ritual. Enraged by the interruption, and terrifyingly emboldened, the killer immediately sought another victim. Less than an hour after Stride's discovery, Catherine Eddowes, 46, was found in Mito Square, a small, dark courtyard in the city of London Yards, outside the Met Police's jurisdiction, forcing the involvement of the city police. This murder was savagely brutal. Not only was her throat cut and her abdomen opened, but her face was horrifically disfigured, and a kidney and part of her uterus were removed and taken by the killer. The level of surgical skill and sheer audacity was breathtaking. It was following the Eddowes murder that the killer made his most audacious and enduring move. Near the doorway of a tenement on Goulston Street, a piece of Eddowes' blood-soaked apron was found. More chillingly, above the apron, scrawled in chalk on the wall, was a piece of cryptic graffiti. "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." A police commissioner ordered the message immediately washed away for fear it would spark anti-Semitic riots in the already volatile area, but the act itself, the taunt, the bloody cloth, was a horrifying signature. And then, the letters. The moment the killer truly took his place in history. On September 27th, 3 days before the double event, the Central News Agency received a letter addressed to the boss, signed Jack the Ripper. This letter, full of gruesome jokes and boasts about the killings, gave the world its chilling. Infamous name, Jack the Ripper. Whether the letter was genuine or a journalist's hoax is still debated, but its impact was undeniable. A few weeks later, on October 16th, the legendary From Hell letter arrived, addressed to George Lusk of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. It was wrapped around a small, preserved piece of a human kidney, allegedly taken from Catherine Eddowes. The letter claimed the killer had fried and eaten the other half. This was the moment the myth solidified. The killer was now playing a terrifying game with the authorities, taunting them with their failures and proof of his atrocities. The investigation was a catastrophe of Victorian policing. The police were overwhelmed, under-resourced, and utterly unprepared for a serial killer. They had no fingerprinting technology. It was invented a decade later. No forensic science as we know it, and the concept of profiling was non-existent. Over 2,000 lodgers were questioned. 80 people were detained, and countless men were considered suspects, including local butchers, doctors, and even a Russian barber. The very structure of the Met Police seats jurisdictional squabbles, its reliance on unreliable informers, and its failure to secure the crime scenes ensured the killer would slip away. The terror reached its horrific climax on November 9th, with the murder of Mary Jane Kelly, 25, the youngest and most beautiful of the victims, and the only one killed indoors. Her murder at 30 Miller's Court was the most savage of all. When the police finally broke down the door, they discovered a scene of unparalleled mutilation. The Ripper had been undisturbed for hours, performing a complete, grotesque, and ritualistic vivisection of her body. Her organs were scattered around the room, and her heart was missing. The sheer scale of the blood and the evidence of the killer is so undisturbed. Meticulous work was so shocking that it finally galvanized the government and the police into realizing they were dealing with a monster of unprecedented proportions. And then, just as suddenly as he arrived, Jack the Ripper vanished. Mary Jane Kelly was the last of the Canonical Five victims. Though other murders occurred in Whitechapel afterward, they lacked the distinct surgical signature of the Ripper. The fog, the fear, and the intense police presence, coupled with the onset of winter and the possibility of the killer being institutionalized, imprisoned, or having simply fled London, brought the reign of terror to an abrupt end. The monster had done his work and retreated back into the impenetrable anonymity from which he had emerged. The mystery has never died. Over the past 130 years, thousands of books, films, and theories have emerged, each naming a new suspect. Who was he? Was it Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence, and Anonymity, the Queen's grandson? A theory popularized by Stephen Knight's Jack the Ripper. The final solution, which claimed a conspiracy involving the monarchy, a secret marriage, and a royal cover-up. The evidence is incredibly weak, but the idea of a royal killer is tantalizing. Was it Montague John Druitt, a barrister who was a suspect favored by some high-ranking police officials? He died shortly after the last murder, leading to speculation that his death ended the spree. Was it Aaron Kosminski, a Polish-Jewish immigrant and asylum patient, who was identified in a police memo decades later as a strong suspect? Modern DNA evidence from a shawl allegedly found at a crime scene points to him, but the chain of custody and testing methods have been fiercely debated and discredited by many forensic experts. Was it Walter Sickert, the famous impressionist painter? Sickert was obsessed with the case, painted scenes inspired by it, and even lived in the lodgings of a former Ripper victim. Crime novelist Patricia Cornwell famously argued he was the killer, citing complex forensic and psychological evidence. But her theory is highly contested. Or perhaps it was the most chilling possibility. An ordinary man, a common butcher, a failed doctor, a man who blended into the crushing poverty, a man whose name was never recorded and whose identity was lost to the history he created. The truth about Jack the Ripper is that his anonymity is his power. He is not just a killer. He is the embodiment of the fear of the unknown, the dark twin of the Victorian era's scientific progress, a monster who exposed the fragility of social order. His legend endures because it is a perfect storm of social decay, police incompetence, media sensationalism, and a genuine, terrifying absence of closure. He is the ghost in the machine of the modern age, the villain whose story we continue to tell because, in a world where everything is supposed to be known, he remains the ultimate bloody ? The files are still open, the crime scenes are long gone, but the hunt in the minds of millions never truly ended. So, do you think you can solve the unsolvable? What suspect from the long list of physicians, butchers, barristers, or royalty truly holds the key to the Ripper's identity? Let me know your best theory in the comments below. And if you were enthralled by this dark dive into history, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to Story in 10 for more true crime mysteries that will keep you up all night.